I'd like to start by acknowledging and paying tribute to the first women in STEM on this continent, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women, who've been using STEM to research and care for this land for over 60,000 years. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're all on and pay my respects to elders past and present. This is the third year we've run this event with Casey Tech School and to celebrate women working in science, technology, engineering and mathematics. Both SELLEN and Casey Tech School are passionate about promoting education and employment opportunities for young people in Casey, and especially passionate about promoting equal opportunities for people of all genders. So we really enjoyed planning this event to celebrate National Women's Day and promote this year's theme, which is Choose to Challenge, looking at ways we can challenge inequality. So the sign for here is Choose to Challenge. I'd also like to thank Casey Tech School's host Chisholm and our event partners, City of Casey, Federation University, Successful Endeavour and St John of God Berwick Hospital for your support, and they've done that for the last 3 years. Special thank you also goes to Tina Bradshaw at Federation University for organising some wonderful women in STEM to attend, some in-person morning teas that are happening at secondary schools. So thank you so much, Tina, for doing that. Today, we'll hear from 4 wonderful women in STEM, 2 presentations followed by a panel Q&A and a breakout activity. As you are listening to the presentations, please type any questions you have for the speakers in the Zoom chat, and we will ask your questions during the Q&A session. So I'd like to first introduce to you Dr Tien Hoon. Tien has loved nature ever since she was a young child growing up in Vietnam. At the age of 6, she came to Australia as a refugee fleeing the Vietnam War. Her approach to life with passion and perseverance earned her a PhD in the evolutionary phylogenetics and conservation of endangered plants. She is also passionate about the use of medicinal plants for treating cancer, diabetes and eye diseases. Tien is now a senior lecturer at RMIT with global recognition for her work in STEM and hopes to make our Earth a cleaner and healthier world. Over to you, Tien.
Thank you, Helen, for that wonderful introduction. And I'm very excited to be here and want to wish everyone a happy International Women's Day. I know we've made great progress and I'm so proud of everyone being a part of it, because we need these changes to make it equal for everyone. So today's talk I've been asked to give, I just wanted to use it to inspire those listening, both those who are starting on a career in STEM as well as remind us who are in it why we're still doing it. It's not moving. Oh, there we go. So my journey started. Well, first I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people and the lands that we stand. And especially in this season, I love going out bushwalking and seeing the native wildlife. It really connects me with nature. And I think it's one of the key mantras that I have in terms of enjoying the environment that I'm in and actually recognizing the things that are native to our land that we live on. Now, my journey wasn't in Australia. I came from Vietnam and my dad was actually a lieutenant in the war. And we were from the old government, so we were persecuted and had to flee our home because my dad was taken to detention centres, or they call it re-education camps. And a lot of my family members were tortured and killed. And it was one of those things where we are so lucky in Australia, we never have to really face those difficulties, things like poverty, not knowing when the food was going to happen, or when we'd eat, or whether there was going to be bombs hitting us at any time. So we escaped that and we went to, as a refugee, and this is a picture of my sister and I on one of the islands. We had nothing but the clothes in our bags, and that dress there was, well, we didn't end up with that. And when I came to Australia, I really loved science. I was so curious about the natural world around us, and I had all these questions that my mum couldn't answer. And when I looked around me, I saw a lot of scientists, but they didn't represent me. They weren't female. They definitely weren't Asians. And so I didn't really have a role model or anyone to look towards and say, well, this is what I want to be. this is a person who's actually succeeded where I want to go. And it was only until I went to university that I met my role model, the person that changed my trajectory. And that was Professor Laurie. He's a mycologist and a plant pathologist. And we still are great friends today. And she works in my lab free. And we just have these wonderful chats every time we want to share ideas. And it's just wonderful to have someone that you can look up to that has taken you under their wing and answered you their questions without any expectation for anything back. She was generous and kind with her knowledge, and it was just one of those moments that really changed my life. Now, I have expertise in a whole range of things because I'm I'm a very curious person. So if I see something that I'm interested in, I try and get to know as much as I can with it. And so I do all sorts of things in terms of science, as well as some IT stuff. So different apps, technologies, engineering, and even drawing, and going to the arts and trying to present the work that I do in a way that everyone can understand it visually. Obviously maths, and I also had a stint in medical sciences. So now I still continue to do a lot of that. So specifically cancer in a lot of pharmaceutical developments. So some of the things that I've got here, oops, why is that going like that? Sorry. I have three main areas that I research in. One, sustainability, so producing things, upcycling our natural products to make them better than they were. So things like sustainable packaging, fire-resistant products, as well as sound absorbing fibers and natural materials. I also have a lot of plants that we're looking at in terms of its health benefits, like for instance, coffee and cacao. You know, why do they make us feel the way they do? Are there actually good things in it that helps you have better brain cells and makes your skin glow, like grow back in age, for instance? And I also do a lot in environmental sustainability, so bushfires, climate change, and mycorrhizal fungi. And they all tie in together because it's all related to plants and how we affect the environment that we live in. And from that, I've actually had a lot of outreach activities, and it's one of the things I really care about in terms of giving back to the community. And this is a picture here of some of the high schools that I've been to, where we talk about the things that we love. And all these students here agree that science we have every day in our lives, and we love it because it's just one of those things that we don't see, but there's so much effort in the background to make it work as a community. And I've had a lot of students graduating, and I really try to have a lot more girls in my group, especially from underprivileged regions like Asia, where they're still considered as inferior. And so I like to give them that stepping stone to help them get on their path, because I know how difficult it is to actually get that chance to develop something that you care about. So my top tips to end it, I think I'm reaching my 5 minutes, is the first one is perseverance. Is to keep trying and try harder, because the end goal is worth it. The second tip is passion. Do something that you love, that you care about, because it means that you never really, if you enjoy what you do, you never really work a day in your life. My last tip is about partnerships, people that connect with the environment that you live in. Have something that you really can join with and build that network and make it work for you. Have a mentor and see what you can do with that and build that relationship. And all that leads to is investing in you and believing in yourself, because you can do it. And if you choose something that you care about and you're passionate about, then you will be well rewarded, and it's really worthwhile. And I think that's the end of my talk. Thank you for listening.
I have to unmute, sorry. Thank you, Dr. Tien. Your passion is evident in the way that you speak, and awesome to see the way that you foster and encourage other women. That's what we all need to be doing, you know, International Women's Day, empowering each other, empowering women to succeed, because then we all benefit. So now I'd like to introduce Associate Professor Sheena McGowan, Sheena is a microbiologist and biochemist who is interested in developing new ways to treat and prevent infectious diseases. Her laboratory has a strong focus in the design of novel anti-malarial drugs, as well as discovering new ways to reduce the impact of antibiotic resistance. Sheena grew up in the Casey area, attending Berwick Secondary College and St Margaret's School before completing her degrees at Monash University. So over to you, Sheena.
Thanks very much, Helen, and thanks, Tien, for your great words. It's fantastic to hear your story. I'll just get my computer going. So I'm at Monash University now in the Department of Microbiology, and within that department, we're under the umbrella of what we call the Monash Biomedicine Discovery Institute. So that Discovery Institute looks physically a bit like this. There's nearly 800 researchers in this precinct. It's one of the largest precincts in Melbourne. And my laboratory is up on the second floor here. So somewhere down in that area there behind the tree. So that's where the lab is, and that's where I've spent a lot of my working life, as well as my education as well. I'm actually been at Monash for a very long time. So in terms of my story, I am more local to the Casey area. So I was born and raised in Fountain Gate. That's where Mum and Dad lived. And I did attend Berwick Secondary College from years 7 to 9. And now the honest truth is that in year 9, I got myself into so much trouble that my parents thought it might be best to get me out of Berwick Secondary College, which at the time was a very large school due to the growth of Berwick. And luckily for me, they were able to, Dad worked 2 jobs, to get me into St Margaret's School, and that's where I went. So I finished my secondary school at St Margaret's, did year 10 to 12 there. And for me, it was a really good move. They were very encouraging of excellence and doing your best. And it really did work very well for me. So from what looked like I might have been getting myself into a bit of trouble in the ages of sort of 14 to 15, the change of school was a good thing for me. And I have this sign here that actually was sent to me by one of my mentors many years ago, saying well-behaved women rarely make history. And whilst I'm not telling you not to behave, I am saying that sometimes things don't always go to plan. And if something does set you back, don't let it stop you. Find your way forward and find something that works for you. Luckily for me, St Margaret's School was a really good move. Now, during this time, even when I was at Berwick High, because it was high school in those days, not secondary colleges, I got interested in science, truthfully and honestly, because it was the one thing my big sister didn't do well. My big sister was a bit of a superstar, had lots of friends, got great grades, did everything right. And the one thing she didn't really like was science. So I decided that would be the best way for me to go, is to go differently to my sister so I couldn't be compared to her. And luckily at about the same time, because I'm really old, it was when DNA technology was really starting to blossom and really new technologies was coming. There was molecular biology, there was genetics, there was sequencing, and all these things were coming on board. And I thought that was the absolute way to go. So the 15, 16-year-old me decided to be a geneticist. That was what I was going to do. I knew that I was going to go and get a PhD and that I was going to be a genetic engineer was my plan at the age of 15. So I took myself off to Monash to do an undergraduate Bachelor of Science. I did a biomedical science degree in those days. And I very excitedly got to second year and enrolled in genetics and truly hated it. It was awful. It was plant biology. The head of department was a tobacco researcher and all they did was plants, and it was awful. And I thought, oh no, now what am I going to do? Luckily in second year, I was also doing microbiology and biochemistry. Now, unfortunately, again, I wasn't the greatest student and I did fail biochemistry at second year. And luckily I kind of got my grades just good enough that they let me into third year on the promise that I would never do biochemistry again. So I have a double major in microbiology and immunology. That's from my third year subjects. And I loved micro. I got very good grades because I loved it. I was passionate about it. It worked for me. It made sense. Immunology I enjoyed, but it was never the passion that microbiology was. So I went on to do honours in microbiology and I completed that degree. And then I actually continued on in the same laboratory and did my PhD in the Department of Microbiology. So I am officially trained as a true microbiologist. I'm allowed to work in a microbiology pathology lab. However, I am a researcher and it was research that I loved. I got into my honours year in microbiology And the head of that lab, who was a very lovely man, went on to be my PhD supervisor, did say to me that I was the weakest of the honours students coming in with my grades, and that I'd probably have to work pretty hard to get through the year. But it turned out when I got into the laboratory, so away from studying in books and away from writing essays and all those kind of exam type things, I was very good on the bench, and research made sense to me because it's just asking questions. It's just finding out answers to things. That's all it ever was for me. And in research, you often fail a lot. Your experiments don't work. And that's not because you're bad at it. That's just because that's how it goes. The experiments don't work. And I suspect sometimes because I wasn't a very good student, that didn't bother me that much. I just like, oh, okay, well, let's try something else. And that's what made a good researcher in the end. So I did go on to do a PhD. I completed my PhD, and by then I had found my place in the world, I thought. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the research I did. However, during the project, I got interested in what we call structural biology. And that took me back to biochemistry, of all things. So when I finished my PhD and finally got a job, which is what my family kept saying to me, are you ever actually going to finish university? I got a job as what they call a postdoc. I returned to the Department of Biochemistry and ended up spending 10 years there, where I did learn biochemistry successfully and got over my second year hurdle that I had. And I went on to do what we call structural biology, which is actually going in to look at the atomic detail of the proteins that do all the work in our bodies and in all cells. Now, as my interest in this field sort of kept going, I knew I still loved microbiology, but I also now liked this structural biology as well. So what I did, and where I'm very passionate about, is combining the two. So now my team do a lot of drug discovery and drug design for new anti-infectives, as we'd call them. So things like antibiotics, antimalarials, antiparasitics, anything that will treat infectious disease. And because of that, we also moved into medicinal chemistry, which is what we need to make new drugs. So we have a lot of chemists on board. I'm missing an R there as well. So this was my journey a little bit. And the reason I wanted to tell you that was, if you have hiccups along the way, don't worry so much. Just find what you like and find what you love and pursue that. There's always ways around if you don't quite get there the first time. So this is the lab. Structural microbiology is my great combination of the two things I love. Here are these pictures underneath are actually the structures of proteins that we have solved. And from many of them are to do with malaria. That's our most advanced projects where we work with the global product developer, Medicines for Malaria. And we also have now some new antibiotic targets as well. And we start looking at the bacteriophage as well as ways of controlling infectious disease. In terms of the choose to challenge concept, or the theme for this year, there's a lot to challenge out there when it comes to STEM and women in STEM. What I've noticed in my 20 years is that women in my STEM, in life sciences, are not rare. There are more women in the junior levels and the entry levels of STEM in biology and biochemistry, structural biology, than there are men. We're at sort of 65% women at those junior levels. However, at the senior levels, at what we call professor and associate professor, that drops down to about 20%. So we're losing women further down the stream. I have no trouble recruiting them in from high school. We have no trouble getting them and investing in them, training them. However, at some stage, something's going wrong and they're choosing to leave the industry. I think a lot of this is that you can't be what you don't see. And unfortunately, when I look upwards at senior roles, there's not a lot of women who look like me. There's not a lot of women, full stop. So when I did my PhD, in the department that I was in, there wasn't a single female professor. There wasn't actually even a single associate professor. I didn't even recognize that that was unusual when I did my PhD. It didn't occur to me that that was a strange thing. Now I look back and think, what the heck was going on? It was literally a department run by basically old white men. And I think that changes what women see as they move forward. So as you're starting to look at your career and career progression, you need to be able to see that there are women ahead of you and that the upper levels look like you and that they reflect you. And so for me, some of the joy I get in my job, I also teach into the university, is standing up there and showing people that it's not just old white men and that it can be anybody who's passionate about the topic. So I think that's something that we really need to consider, is that often our brains are just built by what we see every day. So we need to make sure that what we see every day reflects the society that we live in. There is unconscious bias out there. We do still have gender roles built into us by the way that we're raised. I find it very interesting. There's a thing called the Harvard implicit bias test, where you can sort of check to see what your brain associates with things. When it comes to science, I don't associate any gender to science, but when it comes to, say, management or family roles, my brain is very biased. I'm still being built by a society where women are the caregivers. Women are the people who do a lot of the work around the house. Women are the people who perhaps aren't the CEOs and things like that. And that's where we need to change things and also recognise that it's okay that that's there. We've grown up in this society, and so we just recognise that it's there, and that when we move forward, we consider those factors in our head as well. On a positive note, I will say that change is occurring. It's just really slow. And you've just got to be a bit patient, as well as trying to make the change every day. I think that's the thing. So I can say that for Monash University, when I first arrived as an undergraduate student, across the entire university, the larger university, there was 15% women at the professor level. So that was in the mid-1990s. Now in 2020, we're up at about 33, 35%. So we're moving in the right direction, and we're not there yet. And what we're really hoping is that you guys, as the young people coming up below us and filling in that workplace, will continue to make that change and bring us up to where we can see gender equality and also diversity as well in our leadership roles. So my final thing in terms of choose to challenge is that decisions are made by the people who show up. And if there's something that you don't think is right, or if there's something that you think needs to be changed, then get involved and change it. Part of my passion at Monash University is to change it, is to make sure that a PhD student coming up through my department today sees professors who are female, professors who are Asian, who are Indian, who are European. We need that diversity, and we need to change it. So Monash University at the moment has this logo that I love. If you don't like it, change it. And I would say that to all of you. Find what you're passionate about, even if it's your local sporting club, if it's the climate, if it's your family. Be involved, make a change, be passionate about what you love to do, and be part of that process of making that change. And in that, you'll always enjoy what you do, I think.
Yeah. So true. Thank you, Dr. Sheena, for your wonderful presentation. I think I'm getting the sense that we're having a theme coming through already today, and that is that we need to be passionate about what we do. So, you know, where Cara and I say we're passionate about helping young people in education and finding their career outcomes, then we've got that with Dr. Tien and Dr. Sheena, passionate about what they do so they can know they can make a difference. So now I'd like to introduce our panel. So joining Dr. Tien and Dr. Sheena, we have Dr. Saw Hoon Lim and Dr. Twishi Gulati. Saw Hoon is a plant molecular biologist by training, researching flower pigmentation in orchids. She is a teaching specialist in the Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology at the School of Biomedical Sciences at the University of Melbourne. As beautiful as orchids are, she finds the scholarship of teaching and learning even more captivating. Twishi is a research officer at the Victorian Centre for Functional Genomics at Peter MacCallum Cancer Institute. She is in charge of the quantitative high genomics therapeutic approaches, including, which looks like an acronym CRISPR, so CRISPR. Twishi is passionate about academic research, teaching and education. So now it's time for questions. So if you would like to type in your questions for the panel members in the chat now, we can read those questions and put them to our panel members as appropriate. So I can see one now. How has your work changed during COVID last year? So Dr. Tien, would you like to answer that question and tell us how COVID affected your work?
Well, I was lucky because I had a lot of medical, we were nebulizing a lot of our medical therapies. So we're producing it smaller particles to go into more the deep lungs. So we had special access, but there was a lot of disruption. So the first time lockdown happened, we lost all our cells because they gave us less than 12 hours notice. So we couldn't freeze everything and we had to bring it back from freeze dryer, the liquid nitrogen, and then we had to have access for special hours because security didn't know. And I mean, there was a lot of disruptions and things kept changing all the time. So we just had to be very agile and ready to change plans. Like, you know, if you go into labs, you know that you go and do special things, but then you have to just, if you can't go into the labs because they didn't give you access, you have to do something else until they can give you access. So we learned a lot in terms of flexibility, things which is changing the last minute. So if we couldn't read ourselves because we couldn't get access to a machine, you just had to work around it. I think it really made us stronger. Nearly broke us a few times, but we try to see the good side of it. And now that we're in the home straight, because we had to get permits to travel more than 5Ks, a lot of the students would be very stressed out with their phones, trying to get the permits on their phones in case they were stopped by security. And we had these wristbands and there were so many things, and we just had to be flexible and work around it. Very challenging.
Challenging year for everybody alike, yes. And have we got the
teaching elements too, I imagine. Yep, there's a few ones there. So we got 48 hours notice to lift our courses online, 100% online, even for prac labs, had to be online. So 48 hours notice, as I'm sure all of you experience as well in your schooling, it's quite a lot to get going. We also had students who were isolated from their families because they'd arrived in Australia and then couldn't get back. We had students who couldn't get into Australia. So last year I taught into one course, had students in 14 countries, 7 time zones. We had computer breakdowns in India when India was in lockdown. I had loss of internet in rural Indonesia. One poor person was trying to manage their sister's newborn baby in the same room as the Zoom. So of course we had all of the things that you guys probably experienced with schooling online. We're probably a bit luckier in that we've got, you know, our students are older, but then in some ways, because they're older, they're a little harder to keep in place. So we had teaching elements as well as the laboratories all occurring at once. So trying to run the labs and create courses online was certainly an interesting time.
We had some positivity as well, because on top of that, in addition to being an academic, we also learned to be movie producers, because then we were producing videos online and making it engaging. So that was a skill we all garnered as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So Dr. Saw Hoon Lim, I'd like to ask you this question. Someone has asked, were there points along your education journey where you felt lost, and how did you overcome that?
Well, I must say that I started my journey with a particular focus. In my case, I wanted to study genetics as opposed to Sheena. Sort of, I think we were going at opposing paths to some extent, because now I'm a biochemist, but I started as a geneticist. It was something I liked. And I think along the way, I did question myself, is this where I want to be? Because to me, I'm a very people person. So I wanted a career that I had to interact and got to interact with people rather than being an insular career. And I suppose it was my own personal bias thinking that if I become a geneticist, I'll work in research and I'll just be in this small lab, not talking to anybody, just looking down the microscope. But that's a fallacy within myself, because you can be a researcher and a teacher and interact with so many people, especially with teaching. And that's why I enjoy so much being a teaching specialist, because then I can share the knowledge. So yes, there were small blips along my education path, but look at the bigger picture. Definitely.
Yeah. I think that's so true. And I think that's true of all of us in our education journey and our career journey. You perhaps are never, you start out in a certain direction and then life takes you in other directions and you end up doing a role that's completely different to what you anticipated. And that's great. That's fine. It's all part of the journey and it's part of the learning journey. I think that's so true. I think I'll ask Twishi the next question. Are there any careers where medicine and engineering overlap and combine, so that perhaps someone who's got an interest in the medicinal area can sometimes do both.
I wouldn't be able to help you, but I'm sure that there are areas where, you know, people are trying to develop nanoparticles for treatment of, say, cancer. And you need an engineer who understands what nanoparticles are and what they can do and how you can treat patients with them. So it is definitely possible, but I wouldn't know what degrees you'll have to do to get there, unfortunately.
Yeah. That's
there we go.
okay.
She knows the answer.
Yeah, but I think it's good to highlight that you don't have to be narrowly doing one particular science or field or industry, that you can do 2 or 3 along your journey. So yeah.
And you don't have to you don't need to know what degree or what area you want to be in. If I give my own example, I started working in research in a lab that looked at intervertebral discs, basically the stuff between your vertebrae, where I did my master's. Then I worked in a lab that looked at brain of patients who have multiple sclerosis. And then I worked in prostate cancer and cancer since then. But I guess every bit gave me a set of technical experience and biological, exposed me to the biology of a disease and helped me transition to the other, because I had a basis of biology to understand from. And yeah, if you want to get somewhere, you can get there regardless of which path you start on.
Yeah, it's about the hard work and the gaps in between, I think. I've got a question here. Someone's interested here, is saying, can you please give us an overview of what biomedicine is? I'm not sure I might throw that to Tien, Dr. Tien. So an overview of what biomedicine is.
Well, I think maybe Sheena could probably answer this one, but it's just anything that's, well, I do biomedicine, so plant products that are treating different diseases. And I'd really like to touch on the last one in terms of engineering. We have specialists who design, package up the bioactive compounds so it's smaller, so it travels to different sites. We also have attachments to them so that can be they can travel to the site of action and then release the medicine where it's required. So a lot of that stuff is a lot of technology and engineering the products that we already have and making them suit the purpose. And that takes a lot of expertise in different areas. So it's not just about biology or biochemistry, it's engineering, it's also nanoparticles, it's also biochemistry, as well as chromatography to find out what it does, microbiology to see the pathways it goes, even some animal tests. So, you know, a whole load of the medicines that we have at the end goes through a whole range of things, and biomedicine is just one of those fields where we look at biological organisms and how we can apply that as a treatment. That's what I think of it. Is that right, Sheena?
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. So my team have protein engineers. So I've got 2 protein engineers. My husband's a protein engineer, and we do the same things. We actually engineer the proteins, but also too, we attach them to surfaces. We look at delivery. We look at can they deliver cargo. So yeah, I've got 2 biomedical engineers doing a PhD with me at the moment. I've had 1 graduate already. So yeah, definitely chemical engineers and biomedical engineers often end up in biomedicine. And biomedicine, for the question, it really is a broad term, and it just basically means the study of disease. So if you're studying, you know, a pathway or a protein or something like that that causes disease, be it a chronic disease like cancer or an infectious disease, and you're studying how it works, what's going on, can you treat it, is there drugs, is there vaccines, that would be under the umbrella of biomedicine. So you're not actually a medical doctor, but your study of biology is related to medicine.
Yes, and just to add, I agree with what Tien and Sheena said. Biomedicine, you will also be studying nutrition, metabolism, you know, what happens when you take a particular food, how it processes in your body, what is good for you. So that's all in the package.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. I've got a question here from Amy Moraz at Hampton Park Secondary College. And Amy asks, has anyone on the panel been involved in COVID vaccine research at all? Yes, Dr. Tien.
Oh yes, so we were trying to make medicine smaller so it goes into lungs, because we know COVID is a lot of respiratory infections that does get settles in the deep lungs, and the medicines that we have when you breathe them in, it gets only to the top surface, it doesn't go into the deep lungs. So we were trying to put them through surface acoustic waves to make them smaller, so that you can actually breathe them in and they can go into more smaller areas. So that's why we had special access during the very severe lockdowns, because, yeah, it's one of those things that needed to be developed.
It's fascinating. So I've got a question here from Helen Sylvester at Casey Tech School, and she says, this one's for Sheena, Dr. Sheena. Looking back, what advice would you give your year 9, 10 self, knowing what you know now?
Well, it's hard to look back, because my journey it worked for me, and it worked very well for me. The year 9 student at Berwick High didn't go to class. That was the problem I got into. And not necessarily because I disappeared off campus. I just managed to get myself out of class by A, never showing up, and B, being involved in all the other things that gave me an excuse not to go. I wonder with myself, even if I'd stayed at Berwick, as I had progressed up into high schools, I would have basically been given more to do. There was a little bit of probably a bit of boredom. I probably wasn't doing things that I was super involved and interested in. Didn't need to go to class. I sort of found a way around it. And it was only after a semester that someone rang my parents and said, haven't seen her. So I think, you know, I would have told myself to perhaps get more involved in higher classes and things like that. And I wonder now that might happen more easily, in that I think maybe at year 10 you can take a year 11 class or something like that. I think something that would have kept me a bit more focused and working a bit harder in class might have been a bit better. But it did work out very well for me. I'm not in any way having a dig at Berwick High, but St Margaret's was a much better fit for me. So
yeah. And I'm interested, this is a really good opportunity, having 4 wonderful, intelligent, well-educated women working in STEM, and this is what it's all about, is giving these examples to young people in our community. Is some advice that you would give our young people today? What are the things, you know, we've spoken about being passionate, but in terms of perhaps overcoming challenges, are there times when, you know, not lose the passion, but feel less passionate about things? What are the things that you do to motivate yourselves to keep going in that case?
I actually learned this from a student. He actually told me to look at the ordinary and find passion and excitement in the ordinary, to actually wake up each day to see, even though the same thing, the sun shining, you know, the birds chirping, but to learn a little bit more, to get excited about that. And when you face failures, you get that adrenaline rush. So I'm quoting him here. You get that adrenaline rush, and that pushes you to try again. And I think Sheena mentioned it, the failure, and Tien too, that the failure is what drives you. And that's how you actually cultivate that passion. So enjoy the ordinary.
Yes, yeah. Because I think we were speaking about this before, that in any moment, we only have the present. We don't have the past. The past is memory. The future is imagination. We only ever have the present moment. And I think that's what you're speaking to, is that we see the beauty, the fascination in just the ordinary moments. I think that's so true.
I think building on that as well, I would say to everyone on the panel, is be kind to yourself as well. Not every day is a happy day. Not every day is an easy day. And if there is a time at which you are just feeling, got to be kidding me, cut yourself a break. You know, try and ride that day out and know that maybe, excuse the language, it's a crappy day. You're just having a crappy day. And then remember that that's past, and you wake up the next morning and you do it again. And even if it's a miserable week, then it's just a miserable week, and you get up the next week. And like we were saying, look for the everyday, get out of bed, get to school, get to work, get something done. I'm a big one for a to-do list. And sometimes I will put on my to-do list, get out of bed, because then I can cross it off.
Yeah.
So, particularly, you know, you guys in high school, you're busy. There's lots going on. sometimes you're just not going to have a great day, and that's okay. And cut yourself a break and get yourself up the next day and keep going.
Yeah, because tomorrow's a new day.
Yep, always.
Yeah. So Dr. Twishi, I've got a question here. Who inspired you to go into genetic research?
My high school biology teacher, actually. I think genetics was just something new that I heard of back then when I was in high school. And I was like, oh yeah, that's where I want to go. My parents wanted, like all good Indian parents, wanted me to become a doctor, like a medical doctor. I was like, yeah, I don't want to do medicine. I want to do research. And that's where I ended up 15, 16 years later still. And the funny thing is I never did genetics my entire scientific career. I've done proteomics, I've done work on RNA, but I haven't done genetics, still don't understand any of it. But it's just, I guess it was a passion for science and research and trying to figure out what's wrong in the disease and how you can fix it step by step, slowly, one person at a time, I guess, and get there. It was really good in the sense because in high school we dissected cockroach legs and sheep spines, and that's what inspired me to do it. I was like, if we can look at something under the microscope and see how it works, we can do it on a bigger scale and with a lot more. And I think that's what I remember the most from my high school biology, doing that and having this fantastic biology teacher who's like, you can do whatever you want, you just have to be passionate about it.
Yeah, again, it's the same theme that I think we're having is being passionate about what you're doing. It takes away what might seem like hard work, but it becomes fascinating, and that's why you keep going. Yeah. Have we got any more questions? Would someone like to ask a question of our panel? No, that's okay. What we're going to do now, thank you everyone for your wonderful questions and the answers provided. It's now time for an activity where we will be divided into 4 breakout rooms. Each room will be joined by one of our women in STEM and a KC Tech School facilitator. You'll have 10 minutes to ask the women in STEM questions from the list you've been provided. So I sent out a list to schools saying, questions like, when did you know that you wanted to work in STEM? What do you enjoy about working in STEM? What's something interesting you've learned at work? And that I can imagine is sort of every day something interesting comes along. Why should girls study STEM? And how can we choose to challenge and call out aspects of working in STEM that are unhelpful to women? So you'll be invited to join a breakout room. You'll receive a 1-minute notification before you'll automatically be brought back into this main room where we'll get together again. We come back to the main screen. The breakout session, absolutely fascinating. And when you ask questions and you want to know more, you could ask 100 more. The more you ask questions and you get answers, the more you want to. So I'm just fascinated, and I'd like to do this again so we could get some more answers and talk to more people. But thank you so much for joining us, to the women on the panel. You're inspiring and educated us, and it makes me want to go and learn more. So thank you everyone. I hope you've had a great time and you're feeling inspired. Before we go, I'd love to get a group photo of everyone striking the choose to challenge pose. So feel free to turn your camera on, camera off, sorry, if you prefer not to be in the photo, but we just want to get a bit of a snapshot of all the participants today. And I've asked also if we can have some photos from the in-person morning tea so that I can feature them in our newsletter. So KC Tech School have a newsletter, SELLEN has a newsletter, and I'd really like to feature this wonderful event in that. So please raise your hand to show that you pledge to challenge inequality, and Cara will take some screenshots if that's okay. Is that good, Cara? All good. And thank you again to our wonderful women in STEM. Thank you, Cara, for working with me to do this event every year. It's fantastic. I love it. Hopefully next year we will have in-person event and bring you more exciting women in STEM. And if we can also remember, the SELLEN Careers Expo and Trial Trade is coming up in April. That is an in-person event. It's going to be exciting. You can choose your career pathway. Come and join us on the 27th of April. But apart from that, thank you everyone. It's been great. Take care. Have a lovely day.